In the darkest chapter of ancient Israel's history, when judges ruled the land and chaos reigned supreme, a single horrific crime would ignite the flames of civil war that nearly destroyed an entire tribe forever. This is the epic tale of Israel's war against Benjamin, a story of justice, vengeance, and the devastating consequences of moral collapse in a nation without a king. The sun was setting over the hill country of Ephraim when a Levite and his concubine began their fateful journey home from Bethlehem. The year was around 1200 BCE, and Israel existed as a loose confederation of 12 tribes, bound together by covenant and shared ancestry, yet lacking the central authority that would later unite them under monarchical rule. This was the period of the Judges, an era marked by the ominous refrain that each man did what was right in his own eyes, a testament to the moral and political vacuum that plagued the nation. The Levite had reconciled with his concubine after a domestic dispute and was traveling northward through treacherous terrain. As darkness fell, the couple approached the Jebusite city of Jerusalem, but the Levite refused to lodge among foreigners, preferring instead to continue to Gibeah, a town belonging to the tribe of Benjamin. This decision would prove catastrophic, for the men of Gibeah had become corrupted beyond measure, their hearts hardened by the lawlessness that pervaded the land. When the travelers entered the town square, they found no welcome among the inhabitants until an elderly man from Ephraim took pity on them and offered shelter. The horror that unfolded that night would echo through the generations like thunder across the mountains. As the household prepared for rest, the men of Gibeah surrounded the house, pounding on the door with malicious intent, demanding that the host surrender his male guest for their perverted pleasure. The elderly man pleaded with the mob, even offering his own daughter and the Levite's concubine to satisfy their lust. But the crowd would not be deterred. In a moment of cowardice that would haunt him forever, the Levite seized his concubine and thrust her outside to the waiting predators, sacrificing her life to preserve his own. Throughout the long night, the woman endured unspeakable torment at the hands of the Benjamite mob, their cruelty knowing no bounds as they violated and abused her until dawn. When morning came, she crawled back to the house where her master lodged, collapsing at the threshold with her hands upon the door, a final gesture that would forever symbolize the depths of human depravity. The Levite found her dead and realized she had died from the trauma of her ordeal. Consumed by rage and determined to expose Benjamin's wickedness to all Israel, the Levite loaded his concubine's body onto his donkey and carried her home. Taking a knife, he divided her body into 12 pieces, sending one portion to each tribe of Israel as evidence of the crime committed in Gibeah. This macabre summons achieved its intended effect, for when the tribal representatives received their grisly packages, they were filled with horror and outrage. The response was swift and overwhelming as warriors from Dan to Beersheba assembled at Mizpah, a sacred gathering place where the tribes convened for matters of national importance. 400,000 men of war answered the call, their swords drawn and faces set like flint, united in their determination to avenge the innocent woman. The Levite stood before this massive assembly and recounted the events at Gibeah, carefully omitting his own cowardly role while painting the Benjamites as irredeemable villains. The tribal leaders deliberated through the night, weighing their options with gravity befitting such a momentous decision, for they were contemplating war against their own brothers. Yet the evidence was undeniable, and the crime so heinous that justice demanded action, regardless of familial bonds or tribal loyalty. When dawn broke over the assembly, their verdict was unanimous. Benjamin must surrender the perpetrators of Gibeah for execution, or face the combined might of all Israel. Messengers rode swiftly to Benjamin's territory, carrying the ultimatum that would determine whether peace or war would follow. The Benjamites, proud and defiant, refused to surrender their kinsmen, viewing the demand as an assault on their tribal sovereignty. Instead of compliance, they chose resistance, mobilizing their own forces in a display of solidarity that transformed a criminal matter into full-scale civil war. Benjamin's military capabilities were not to be underestimated, for though they were the smallest tribe numerically, they possessed warriors of exceptional skill and courage. 26,000 Benjamite soldiers gathered at Gibeah, supplemented by 700 chosen men who were left-handed slingers capable of hurling stones with deadly accuracy. These elite warriors would prove instrumental in the coming battles, their unique abilities giving Benjamin a tactical advantage that would confound their enemies. The first battle commenced near Gibeah with Israel, confident of swift victory, their overwhelming numerical superiority seeming to guarantee success. The Confederation had organized their forces with military precision, yet they had underestimated both Benjamin's fighting spirit and the difficult terrain. When the armies clashed in the early morning light, the sound of battle echoed across the hills like thunder. The Benjamites fought with the desperation of cornered lions, their intimate knowledge of local geography allowing them to execute devastating flanking maneuvers. The left-handed slingers proved particularly effective, their stones finding gaps in armor and striking down officers with lethal precision. By evening, 22,000 Israelite warriors lay dead on the battlefield, while Benjamin's forces remained largely intact and defiant. The devastating defeat sent shockwaves through the Israelite camp, forcing the tribal leaders to reassess their strategy and question whether God truly supported their cause. That night, they gathered at Bethel, the house of God, seeking divine guidance through prayer and sacrifice. The priests consulted the sacred lots, and the answer came back affirmatively. Israel should continue the fight against Benjamin. Emboldened by this divine endorsement, the Confederation regrouped for a second assault, refining their tactics and addressing the weaknesses that had led to their initial defeat. Yet when battle was joined again, the results were even more disastrous than before, with 18,000 more Israelites falling to Benjamite swords and slings. The second defeat plunged Israel into despair so profound that many began to question whether their cause was just. The surviving warriors wept bitter tears as they counted their losses, realizing that nearly 1 in 10 of their number had perished in just 2 days of fighting. It was at this critical juncture that Israel's leaders made a pilgrimage to Shiloh, where the Ark of the Covenant resided in the care of Phinehas, the high priest. Here, in the most sacred shrine of their faith, they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings, pouring out their hearts before the Lord. When Phinehas finally emerged from the Holy of Holies with God's response, his words electrified the assembled multitude like lightning splitting the darkness. The Lord had indeed ordained Israel's victory over Benjamin, but it would come only after tremendous sacrifice, and the timing would be according to divine will. Armed with this prophetic assurance, the Confederation prepared for a third and final assault, employing a sophisticated battle plan that would exploit Benjamin's overconfidence. The strategy involved a complex deception that required precise coordination between multiple army units, testing the tactical skills of Israel's commanders to their limits. The main force would engage Benjamin in frontal assault near Gibeah, drawing their warriors away from the city in pursuit of what appeared to be another retreating Israelite army. Meanwhile, 2 separate ambush forces would circle around the settlement under cover of darkness, positioning themselves to strike the undefended city when the moment was right. As dawn broke on the 3rd day of battle, the Benjamites observed the approaching Israelite army with satisfaction, confident that they were about to inflict a 3rd consecutive defeat. The initial engagement followed the expected pattern, with Israel appearing to attack frontally before beginning what looked like another panicked retreat. The deception worked flawlessly, as Benjamin's warriors abandoned their defensive positions, to chase what they believed was a broken and fleeing enemy. Behind them, the city of Gibeah lay virtually undefended, protected only by a skeleton garrison that could never hope to resist a determined assault. The first ambush force emerged from concealment, overwhelmed the remaining guards, and set the city ablaze, sending columns of smoke into the sky. When the pursuing Benjamites saw the smoke rising from their burning city, they realized with mounting horror that they had been outmaneuvered and trapped. The retreating Israelite army suddenly turned to face them with renewed aggression, while the second ambush force emerged to block their retreat. What had begun as another pursuit of seemingly defeated foes had become a nightmare of encirclement and annihilation. The final battle was a massacre of unprecedented proportions, as 25,000 Benjamite warriors perished in a single day of carnage. The Confederation's vengeance was total and merciless, extending beyond the battlefield to encompass every settlement in Benjamin's territory. Cities were burned, livestock slaughtered, and entire populations put to the sword, leaving behind only smoking ruins and scattered bones. Only 600 Benjamite men managed to escape the slaughter, fleeing to the Rock of Rimmon, where they took refuge in caves and crevices. For 4 months they remained there, surrounded by their enemies, but protected by the fortress-like terrain that made assault impossible. As the immediate fury of battle subsided, the leaders of Israel began to grapple with an unexpected consequence of their overwhelming success. In their zeal to punish Benjamin for the crime at Gibeah, they had sworn sacred oaths that no Israelite would give his daughter in marriage to a Benjamite. The 600 refugees at Rimmon represented all that remained of one of the 12 tribes, and without wives to bear children, they would disappear from history within a single generation. The magnitude of this unintended consequence struck the tribal assembly with the force of divine judgment. The 12 tribes were not merely political entities, but sacred institutions that represented God's covenant with their ancestors. Yet their oaths had been sworn before the Lord and could not be broken without bringing down divine wrath upon the entire confederation. Desperate to find a solution that would honor their vows while preserving Benjamin's lineage, the tribal leaders searched their records for any group that had failed to participate in the war. Their investigation revealed that the men of Jabesh Gilead had ignored the call to arms, remaining in their city while their brothers shed blood for justice. An army of 12,000 warriors marched against Jabesh Gilead with orders to execute every inhabitant except for the virgin women who could serve as wives for the Benjamite survivors. The assault was swift and brutal, leaving the city in ruins, but yielding 400 young women who were transported to Shiloh as involuntary brides. Yet even this grim harvest fell short of the need, leaving 200 Benjamite men still without prospects for marriage. The final solution came through an observation about an annual religious festival held at Shiloh, where young women would participate in ritual dances among the vineyards. The elders devised a plan that would allow the remaining Benjamites to seize wives without technically violating the oath that prohibited giving daughters to them in marriage. The survivors were instructed to hide in the vineyards during the festival, and when the dancing began, to emerge and carry off as many women as they needed. The desperate scheme was executed during the next festival, as 200 young women found themselves suddenly seized by wild men who had emerged from concealment. The shocked families and festival participants could only watch helplessly as their daughters and sisters were carried away to an uncertain fate. Though the kidnapping fulfilled the technical requirements of the oath, it represented another moral compromise that added to the already staggering ethical cost of Israel's war. With wives secured through these extreme measures, the surviving Benjamites were finally able to begin the long process of rebuilding their tribe from the ashes of destruction. They returned to their devastated territory and began the backbreaking work of reconstruction, clearing rubble from destroyed cities and replanting burned fields. The 600 men who had hidden at Rimmon became the fathers of a new generation that would carry the name of Benjamin into the future. The war's conclusion left Israel fundamentally changed, sobered by the realization that their righteous anger had nearly led them to commit fratricidal genocide. The confederation that had assembled at Mizpah with such moral certainty found itself grappling with the unintended consequences of its actions. The empty spaces where Benjamite cities had once stood served as silent monuments to the terrible price of civil conflict and the dangers of unchecked vengeance. The chroniclers who preserved this story for future generations concluded their account with a phrase that encapsulated the entire tragic episode. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes, a judgment that explained both the original crime and the excessive response. The absence of central authority had created a vacuum that was filled by competing claims of righteousness, each side convinced of its own moral superiority. The legacy of Israel's civil war against Benjamin would resonate through subsequent generations as both a cautionary tale and a reminder of the Confederation's fundamental fragility. The story became part of the national memory, told and retold as a warning about the consequences of moral collapse and the dangers of solving violence with violence. Future conflicts would be measured against this standard of fratricidal destruction, and the near extinction of Benjamin would serve as a permanent reminder that even righteous causes could lead to unrighteous outcomes. As centuries passed and Israel transitioned from tribal confederation to unified monarchy, the events at Gibeah would be remembered as marking the end of an era. The judges who had governed during this period would be succeeded by kings who provided the stability and unified leadership that the Confederation had lacked in its darkest hour. If you found this epic tale of ancient warfare and its devastating consequences compelling, please consider subscribing to our channel for more biblical narratives that bring history to life. Like this video if it helped you understand this crucial period in Israel's development, and share it with others who appreciate the dramatic stories that shaped our world. Your support helps us continue exploring these fascinating chapters from humanity's past.